that? Okay, we'll wait and I'll get started here and wait for some people to join in and we'll take a look. Hey, Chick, how you doing, bud? All right. What on earth? Is there some glitch going on with TikTok right now? Yeah, I saw you were feeling bad, man. I hope you feel better. Do you know what you got? My birthday was my birthday. It's just another day, dude. It wasn't the worst, wasn't the best. I don't know, but it was a day. I worked and I was putting out fires at work all day, which that's kind of how it goes sometimes. This is kind of weird that I don't have that many people in here, but it's saying I have 159 likes already. I don't think that's right. But whatever. So I told myself I wasn't going to go on some social media because I knew what I was going to see. I knew that no matter what the outcome of the trial was, it was just going to be a lot of back and forth. But yeah, here I am. Hey, thanks, Fair. I appreciate that. So just to give you an idea, the reason I'm on here is just to discuss it. And what I'm hoping is it remains civil. So if any of you are going to come on and just spout hatred in the comments, I'll mute you. You're out. I'm not interested in that kind of a thing. But what I did was I decided not to let the news deliver me the information about the trial. And I did that because I knew that it would be skewed one way or the other, whichever, direction politically you lean. So I ended up streaming the trial as I was driving to, from appointment to appointment and just listening to the prosecution and listening to the defense, listening to the judge. And there was no commentary. There was no talking head in the corner going, this is what this means and this is what that means. I didn't want any of that. I wanted just to listen to what they said, to the evidence presented, and come up with my own opinions as to what really happened. So I've been one that's detached a bit from mainstream media for a little while now. And the reason I did that is because I see how skewed it's become. There's very little news anymore. It's nearly always editorial. It's always, not always, but it's mostly commentary about news stories. And to actually gather the proper facts many times is difficult for a lot of people unless they know which sources to go toward that actually are trustworthy and just deliver what the news actually is. So I've reduced my intake to 2 news sources. Say about them whatever you will, but I decided to listen to one side that leaned moderate conservative and one that leaned moderate liberal. That means that they didn't skew far left or far right and carried with it the intention of swaying your opinion toward one side of the aisle. So the 2 news sources that I tend to listen to are Daily Wire, which whenever they're doing anything that's opinion, they tell you that it's opinion and they tell you which side that they believe in. I respect that. The other side that I listen to is Tim Pool. If you're not familiar with Tim Pool, he was an on-ground field reporter for Vice. He worked for Disney for a little while, but he's an independent. He would call himself a moderate left or moderate liberal libertarian. So I listen to a moderate right and a moderate left, and then where they agree, I find tends to be the truth. So you can not like either one of those news sources. That's just fine. But like I said a few moments ago, when I was listening to this trial, I listened to no commentary. I listened to no news outlets that were covering the trial. I listened to the trial feed by itself. So, that being said, my opinions are my own. They are not the opinions of talking heads. And anyone you ask will say, well, my opinions are my own too. Okay, you can say that. But if you intellectually, honestly look at it and analyze your intake of media and where it comes from, can you honestly say that it has been not been swayed in any way by their commentary? In this case, I can say that about my own, about this particular instance. I can't say that about everything, because certainly you get, depending on where you listen, you get swayed one way or the other. But I came on here specifically I want to understand how someone could have listened to the trial, if they did, listen to the evidence presented, and come to the determination that the guilty verdict was proper or appropriate. I was willing to listen to why he was guilty if he was, and I saw nothing. I saw nothing that pointed to anything but self-defense. Now, granted, this is coming from someone that I am a Second Amendment advocate. I believe very strongly in the right for us to defend ourselves against each other as well as against tyranny abroad and domestically. So I do have a bias in that way that I'll admit to openly here. But so consider this. As it was presented, and this was not contested, at least not successfully by the prosecution. The story went as this. The media told everyone that a 17-year-old vigilante grabbed a gun, crossed state lines, and went out patrolling in order to find political dissidents that he disagreed with and take them out. None of that was revealed to be true. And the prosecution didn't even present that as a case. So that story, if that's what you think happened, was literally completely driven by the media as a narrative. So we'll leave that one alone, because that has been determined in a court of law under oaths of everybody as a lie. That's not an opinion. That is a fact that is now settled. So if you carry that opinion as an argument, I'm very sorry. I'm not going to hold that as valid. What actually happened was a friend of his asked him to come and stand out in front of his business and just deter people from trying to come in and do damage. Now, he went out there also with a medical pack, and anybody who was in need of some kind of medical attention, he was trying to help them. Now, granted, it was said that he had said he was an EMT, so the title EMT he was not. So that was a little misleading, and I'll admit to that, certainly. But he was a lifeguard, and he had medical training in resuscitation and things like that. And he did actually assist people medically. So what he actually did was he was out there and he was just in front of the area that he was trying to defend. Earlier in that evening, now I forget the names, I'm probably going to butcher them, but the first person that attacked him, which was really the crux of the entire thing, if you feel that he was guilty of the first, if the first one was murder in some way, then the other ones feasibly have a case. If you don't believe that the first one did, feasibly there was not a case. So What had happened was the person was verbally berating him, and there was a lot of semantics that I'm not going to repeat because I find them to be vulgar. This person, the first one, was a known child sex offender 5 times, with boys aged 9 to 11. Okay? So if you're mourning his death because he was some righteous or innocent person, I would ask that you self-reflect and take a look at the facts. So Kyle decided to run away from this person, and he was given chase. That also is not contested. There's multiple video showing that exact instance, so that's settled as well. So when Rittenhouse turned, this person was only a few feet away from him, lunging at his rifle, attempting to grab it. There was residue of gunpowder after the round had been fired on the person's hands and very close. So it was a very close shot. It wasn't like I'm aiming in at someone far away and trying to pick them off. It was nothing like that. So I would hope that those of you who watch the trial or listen to any news know that that's also not the case. So the person was coming at him, attempting to kill him. And that is now a settled argument by the court. So there's that. Now, as you go forward, then he actually circles back around to check on the person that he just fired upon. Realizing that there was nothing he could do, he knew that he should turn himself in. So he then turned to go down the street, away from the people around him, toward the flashing lights of the cops. Okay? As he was running away, I think it was 4 other people attacked him. One of them knocked him down, hit him in the head with a skateboard, and then one of them, they called him Jumping Kick Man or something like that. Kicked at him, kicked him in the head, spun him around. So I'm sure they clocked him pretty hard there. He did not fire on any of them. He got up and turned around and kept going, kept running away. But then they came at him again. One of them tried to pull his weapon away. One of them again tried to hit him with the skateboard. And finally, one of them had a pistol and pointed it at his head. Okay? So this last one had said in their previous statements to the police that they didn't have a gun at all. There was another statement made by him that he had lost his gun. And then suddenly in the trial, he was asked by the defense, now, did the defendant point his weapon or fire at you before or after you pointed your weapon at him? He actually asked that as a statement. He said, they said, so you pointed your gun at him, and it wasn't until then that the defendant fired. Is that correct? And that person said, correct. On the stand under oath, he admitted that he had pointed his gun at the head of the defendant before that defendant fired. Rittenhouse fired. Okay? So if this were you, if someone pointed a gun at your head and you had a weapon on you, what would you do? That question aside, what does the law say that you're allowed to do? The law says that you're allowed to defend yourself. He was running away from all of these things. And in my opinion, and those of you who follow me know, but those of you who don't, I'm a former Marine. I don't look it anymore. But I was once upon a time in the Marine Corps, and I know a little bit about weaponry. I actually own an AR-10 myself. I've fortunately only had to use it for hunting, and that's all I ever hope to have to use it for. But it is sitting ready at arm's length if something else were to occur. I feel like he actually showed amazing restraint considering how many people were attacking him at different times, because he would have been justified to have fired more than he actually did. And I believe that he probably would have had the same result as the case concluded now. So, putting that out there, let's go a little deeper. And I'm pretty sure that one of my guest requests here is someone, oh, maybe not. If the person that I'm thinking will, if they come back on, I'll bring them on. I was talking to them briefly on Facebook, but we'll briefly discuss the racial side of this whole thing. So in the trial, there was really nothing of racism brought up. And the reason why was because they went through Rittenhouse's phone, they went through his social media, and they found no evidence of any kind of white supremacy ties or anything like that. That being said, the reason for what was happening there in the first place. So this is going to really get into the crux of what I came on here to talk about. So you had an instance that triggered people to protest. And I'll use the word protest first, because I certainly believe that there were many people out there who were protesting, were doing so for the cause that was being stated, was to protest a specific event. Many were not there for any purpose like that whatsoever. They were out there for chaos. They were out there to riot, essentially. And I do want to separate those two groups because it is improper to lump them together. But the ones that attacked Rittenhouse were the latter. None of those 4 or 5 actually white men, one of which was and this isn't alleged, was a child rapist. None of them were attacking him for anything to do with the cause that the actual protesters were out there for. So there was an argument as to why was Kyle Rittenhouse out there at all? Okay, we can ask that question in fairness. So again, the story as it was presented in court under oath was that a business owner asked his friend, I believe his name was Dominic, to help defend his property. And then he asked his friend Kyle to assist him. And that was their motivation for being there. Why did they have to be there in the first place? So that's the first question. But you need to take that back another step. Why was the situation such a case where they were needed at all? Why is it that the police were told and ordered to back down and to not do their jobs of rounding up people that were breaking the law? I'm not talking about the peaceful protester people, and there were some. I'm talking about the people that were literally going out and setting things on fire, which the first person did, and just causing chaos and burning down buildings and burning down small businesses, the community that some were a part of in the first place. So the question really should be asked of the mayor, the governor perhaps, as to why this was being allowed. Because it wasn't the first night. This wasn't just some sporadic event that just came up and went away. This was ongoing. Why were they needed in the first place? Ask yourself that question. So if justice is just allowing injustice to occur, it's not justice at all. And just so you know, I mean, those of you, I don't know, I haven't been watching the comments here. I'm just kind of pontificating, if you want to call it that. But I think people really need to take a hard look at the media that they intake, the opinions that they have and why they have them, and really ask yourself for once, maybe the first time, am I right about this? I've asked myself that many times, not only during this, but over the last few years. About, okay, this is what I feel right now. This is what I think right now. Am I right? What evidence supports me being right? What evidence supports me being wrong? What logically supports me being right or logically supports me being wrong? I think that not enough people ask that question. So, yeah. So really the crux of this case comes down to that, but it really comes down to, does someone have the right to defend themselves? Where is the line drawn when it comes to defending yourself? Because regardless of the weapon or any other argument of that, if it was fist to fist, does one person have the right to defend themselves? If it was, let's ask this, let's ask another way. Let's say a woman was being yelled at by a man, and he was saying, I'm going to effing kill you. And so she decides to run and is given chase. Little does the perpetrator know that she has a handgun in her purse, and she pulls it out and fires, preventing her death, maybe even rape. Did she not have the right to do that? That's a very similar thing as to what we're describing here. Now, there's all the other political turmoil around that, but really what the case was about was, did this person have the right to defend themselves? Is there any evidence that he provoked an attack or instigated that? And the answer was no. And it was all under oath as a no. So, for those of you saying yes to that question, that the person provoked the attack, I would say that the burden of proof is on you to provide that evidence, because a professional lawyer, and I say that lightly because it blew up in his face pretty bad, but a professional team of lawyers and the state of Wisconsin was unable to provide any relevant proof that he provoked the attack. And on top of that, we went through the entire case up until the closing statement without hearing anything about that instance, that exact argument. They didn't ask about provocation, but the closing statement, he decided to change the entire premise of the offense, because he knew that the case had been blown up in his face. Everything that had fallen apart, he knew he couldn't rely on that to win the case. So as a lawyer saying, what am I going to do to try and convince this jury that he's guilty? And he changed the entire argument and presented a piece of evidence during that was not presented in discovery to the defense, which is also improper. And the only thing presented was a picture that had been, we'll say, adjusted in some way to try and make assumptions in pixels. I'm not going to get into the technicalities of that, but long story short, in the manual of the program used to put forth this piece of evidence, it said right in the manual that this cannot be used as a crux or as a main argument in trial. So it really was arguably not admissible at all. The judge didn't dismiss it outright. He played it very smart because he wanted to wait to see the state's response before he responded to any of the motions for mistrial and things like that. So I think he was smart in being patient about things. And I'll respond to this comment. He is seen running towards chaos multiple times. So the times in the footage that he's running, he is running from the initial assault point straight toward the police line. He was not patrolling or going around on streets at all. He was in front of the business that he was protecting the entire time up until the point where everything kind of blew up. So there's that. So here's another thing to throw out there. So, like I said, I was in the Marine Corps. I know quite a bit about. Now, Law Dog, I don't want to. I'm not going to come across for people that disagree with me that hard. I would rather attack ideas than attack people. So I know you aren't being overly brazen here, but that's not my intention here. My intention here is to present the facts and then my opinion of those facts and understand what evidence someone would possibly think retorts that claim. So just throwing that out there. So one of the other topics I did want to bring up was the rifle itself. Okay. I could show you examples visually from what I have here. I'm not going to because TikTok has a pretty deep bias against anything that has to do with firearms, so I'm not going to show you all that. But an AR-15, at least the one that he was using, uses a 5.56 round, which is the exact same round I used when I was in the Marine Corps, which by most accounts is nearly a pea shooter. If you've ever heard of a 22 is commonly used to shoot squirrels and small game. And some people if you get a really nice shot on a deer and it's a clean shot and you use a hollow point, you probably could take down a deer okay with it. The AR-15 is not a powerful round. It is actually less powerful than many handguns. It just has a longer barrel, so the range is better. So this is a semi-automatic rifle, which nearly all guns you purchase, whether they be handguns or rifles, are semi-automatic. All that means, for those of you who are unaware, is when you pull the trigger once, one round comes out of the barrel. And then when you pull it again, another round has already been chambered and ready and fires one round. So yes, you can fire as fast as your finger can move. And that's really the same for handguns as well. Revolvers until you run out of ammo. The exception to that would be a bolt action. So what a bolt action, the difference is you pull the trigger, one round goes down range. You take the bolt, you pull it back, and you chamber another round, and then you fire again. So that's a non-automatic, if you want to call that, but a bolt action is what that's known as. The AR-15 is most certainly less powerful than many handguns. I won't say most. It depends on the size, the caliber, and how it's set up. But a 44 Magnum, a Desert Eagle, a 38 Special, all of those are shooting larger and more powerful rounds where at close range, they would do more damage. Unquestionably so. My AR-10 I have an 18-inch barrel on it for extended distance. And it shoots a .308 Winchester round, which is much larger than an AR-15 round by probably about 30%, 35, 40%, somewhere in that range. Does a lot more damage, is a higher velocity as well with the barrel setup I have. Anyway, that being said, the reason that people look at the AR-15 and they're like, oh my gosh, it's this military, this and that and the other, is just because of how it looks. It's black. You know, it has it's generally mostly black unless it's painted. Some people will paint theirs, which I've thought about doing. But the reason that it's so popular is because it's so customizable. You can buy accessories and modify it in many, many different ways depending on what you're using it for. So the fear of this particular weapon is strange to me because if you take the vast majority of gun deaths in the U.S. and you take away suicides, which last I checked was somewhere in the mid 60%, it reduces the number drastically, less than half of what they were. And then the AR, we'll just say the ARs in general, not even just the 15s, is less than 1% of the total deaths by weapons from gun deaths in the U.S. The vast majority of those are handguns. And it's very odd that the focus is so heavily on rifles and the ARs than it is on handguns. The handguns seem to be the problem, and it's in the specific areas where they are being purchased illegally or traded illegally and all of those things that go against the law. So I'm all about gun control in the laws that we have, in that we should enforce the ones that we have. And when you have felons that have weapons illegally, when you have purchases that are made illegally, absolutely. I hold my conceal and carry, and when I purchased my AR, I got the permit for a right to purchase. That's how the law works in Minnesota here. So that being said, it's strange to me that the focus of everything is so heavy on that particular rifle when all of the numbers point toward other things. Just find that odd. So anyway, that being said, I'll start paying some attention here to comments now. For those of you that are in my feed that are mods, thank you for keeping things civil. What I'd ask of you is that I don't want to deter civil discussion. If someone is being truly disgusting in their comments, you can certainly block. I do prefer mutes because I would much rather, if people choose to stay, I'd rather them hear the messages. But yeah, so that being said, I'm willing to kind of open things up a bit. If I don't know you and you're putting in requests, I'm honestly a little reluctant to bring you on. So I see that Barracuda, you've been waiting for a little while. So what I would ask of you of this, if you are willing to keep things civil, keep things clean as far as your choice of words and speech, I'm willing to have a discussion with you about it. So I will bring you on first, and then we'll just see how it goes. So all of you that are on, thank you for joining. We're talking about the Rittenhouse trial here, and I'm wanting to understand the reasoning for people to oh, your screen went black. Here, let's see here. Let's try this. What I'll do, I'll turn this off for a moment. Whoops. Sorry. I'll turn this off for a moment, and then I'll turn it back on. Let's see. How do I do that? Oh, great. Did I just ruin my own... Give me a second. I have to figure out how to turn on guests again. Percy, if you're still on, if you know how to do this, please let me know. Let's see here. Oh boy, I apologize. I actually haven't ever turned this off here. If anyone knows how to turn on, I just turned off guest requests. If someone knows how to turn it back on, let me know how. But I am willing to take people on to speak with here. Here, let's try this. Nope. Yeah, if I press the back button, I know it's going to stop my feed, so I'm not going to do that. Well, anyway. Well, if I can't figure it out, I can't figure it out. But anyway, so I'll answer you guys' comments here. So here's a question I would ask. What piece of evidence leads you to believe that Kyle Rittenhouse is guilty? What was presented in court by the prosecution that leads you to the conclusion that he deserves to have gotten a different verdict than what he got? Let me ask you that question first. And meanwhile, I'll try and figure out how to turn this back on. So Rosie, the topic is the Rittenhouse trial. Throughout the live here, I presented as to why I believe that he was innocent and it was self-defense. And I'm asking for people who disagree with that and believe that he was actually guilty. I would like to hear the reasons as to why or what was presented in the trial by the prosecution that leads you to that conclusion. That's what I would like to hear. All right, I'm going to keep trying to figure this out. That's kind of bizarre. And let me see if I can. Ask a Marine? Well, I'm a Marine. What real ones agree with you and why? I served in 1st Marine Division in Camp Pendleton under General James Mattis. I can bring you my coins if you want to see those. The prosecution presented zilch. I mean, they made a couple of statements. They got beat down pretty heftily by the defense. I think they were wholly unprepared. San Diego represent. That's funny. I went to Parris Island, but I was stationed on the West Coast. Did you see the earlier footage before he shot anyone, where he was going around the buildings and helping people with the lady with her ankle and things like that? I did. I didn't see any issues with any of that. So what was it that you found an issue with that one? Let's see here. I think he is a Marine, and I said I was a Marine, and he's saying that because we disagree, I'm not a real Marine. I don't know. If I'm putting words in your mouth, I apologize, but that's the implication that I got out of your statements earlier. But yeah, those reporters that went after the jurors attempting tampering was severe. That's what searching for conflict looks like? Well, that's not what my patrols in Iraq looked like. So I'm not sure where you served or where you might have been deployed if you were, but he was weapons down. He was going and helping people and putting the rifle to his back to make sure that it was not pointed at anyone. I'm not sure if you understand what you're saying there, but I disagree. Well, let's see here. Well, I guess I might as well at least turn Q&A back on. So if you do have a question, you're certainly welcome to put it in the Q&A. I disagree with multiple Marines. Well, all the ones I correspond with that I served with were very happy with how that thing went down. If that was the case, if he was searching for that, why on earth wouldn't he have gone with someone else and patrolled together if he was actually patrolling with the intent of finding combatants? I'm extremely naive. Okay. Think what you will of me. So just because I disagree with you on one point, I'm naive. Okay, that's kind of a stretch, but believe as you wish. Let's see here. And I think that I hope that that doesn't start to become a trend, but it will reach a point where the normal folk will not stand for that anymore. Okay, 56 teeth. 56 teeth. You've accused me of being a racist. So present your case. What is it about me that you believe makes me a racist? And I really hope my friend Jeremiah happens to hop on here and can just tear you down. That would be great. But if he doesn't, that's fine too. You can't wait for a riot to be just like Kyle. To be attacked by a pedophile? Is that what you're inviting on yourself? I don't want that for me, but to each their own. I'm not one who would want that for myself. So that's funny. So I haven't mentioned Trump once. So what leads you to believe that I'm a Trump lover? I actually just told you that I listened to I guess I didn't just tell you, it was a while back, that I listened to a moderate liberal news source as one of my sources. So what leads you to that conclusion? See, this is what happens. What people do is they'll take one opinion and they'll paint this entire caricature of what they think you are around you. And it's funny because if you're white, then all of these other things line up as to what you must believe because you're white. Is that not racism? It is. So just because of his age, he doesn't have the right to defend himself? Because according to Wisconsin law, he most certainly did. That was one of the issues that was brought up nearing the end of the trial, was the length of the weapon. And it was dismissed. And it wasn't contested by the prosecution because they knew that they didn't have a case to bring up. So that particular argument is also moot. And no one contested it. All right, I'm going to try and get back to some of these comments here. There's quite a few of you in here tonight, so I'm doing my best to keep up with some of these, but I'm not going to promise to get to every comment that I see. It was him or them. At the points that he chose to fire, I would agree. He waited until they were right up on him, which, again, to me shows a lot of restraint, because that particular weapon has a max effective range of 800 yards. Generally, 500 is the most that people tend to use the weapon for. That's how we were trained in the Marines. Now, granted, the AR-15 isn't exactly the same as the M16A2. The M16A2, of course, has the 3-round burst option, which makes it an assault rifle. But with the AR-15, it does not have that feature. It only has the safe and single auto. I'm sorry, single semi-auto. Got to use the right terms here, right? Hey, Simplify to you too, bud. But he could have shot from hundreds of yards away and hit his target if he'd chosen to. Yet, they were right up on top of him when it happened. Yeah, his marksmanship was quite impressive, especially the bicep shot. That one, it could have been a lucky one. But I really, it's hard to say. In the mindset that he must have been at that point, I mean, he certainly was going through that initial PTSD of having taken a life. And I can't imagine how he felt. It must have been terrible. Yeah, it's easy for you to call him a coward. If a mob of people was coming at you and you showed that kind of restraint, I would be impressed. Wow. And if you're saying that you're a Marine and you're calling that's just detestable, bud. That's very sad for me to hear from another Marine. But hey, to each their own. Yeah, okay. So if someone was coming at you with a skateboard and beating you in the head and kicking you in the head, you do nothing? You just take it? He was supposed to just take it, huh? He was supposed to let himself be killed for what? That would have been the honorable thing to do? Is that really what you think? Do I? Well, the rack on my uniform would say otherwise, pal. I'm going to leave that one alone. Anyway. So any of you who are on here right now, if you're people who do lives yourselves, I turned off accidentally here my I thought I was just going to press the reset on it. I turned off the guest request feature, and I'd like to turn it back on during the live without turning my live off. So if one of you knows how to do that, please say so, and I'd be all right. So you're done here. For any of you who actually put truly disgusting comments in, I'm not going to tolerate that. I am a Christian, yes. Coleman. I am indeed. But yeah, if any of you know how to turn on that feature, I did want to be able to take on guests if they chose to here. So, I appreciate that. Thank you, Texan. Yeah, I suppose so. But it really is astounding to me how someone, if you just take everything into context, that it was not self-defense. I just don't see any evidence put through that shows that there was any. I don't see how it wasn't self-defense. And I'm willing to listen. I have an open mind about things. I've changed quite a few beliefs over this last year, actually. I just haven't seen it presented, even from the liberal side, which I was saying. I listened to a moderate liberal news source, independent, because at this point I can't turn on the TV with the news that's on TV. It's just all money and where it's going. So I'm just not on board with that one. So someone asked, what does Reformed Christian mean? So basically what that means is you hold to a confessional. You're a cessationist. You're a Calvinist. What am I missing here? Covenant theology. You believe in a covenant theology. There's one I'm missing here. What did I miss? That's basically it, though. Joe Rogan is moderately liberal. I wouldn't say moderately liberal. If you're implying that that's the news source I'm referring to, no. I'm referring to Tim Pool. Tim Pool is actually, or he was a field reporter for Vice. He was heavily involved in covering the events of Occupy Wall Street. And he openly calls himself liberal, but he's a moderate liberal and tends toward libertarian views as far as that kind of thing goes. So that's what I'm actually referring to. What did I miss? Covenant cessationism. Was it creeds? So thank you, Jenna. Is it creeds that I missed? Okay. Well, fair enough. But yeah, that's where we are. That's what Reformed means. So Karen Graves. So you bought the line of don't bring a military gun to a fist fight. So let me ask you this, being who I assume would be a woman. If you had a pistol in your purse and you were running away from someone that you didn't maybe know at the time was a 5-time child sex offender for boys 9 to 11 years old, and this person said, I'm going to effing kill you numerous times, and you ran from them and they gave chase, and they got within a couple feet of you and were grabbing at you, do you not have the right to pull your weapon and defend yourself? regardless of what weapon that is? I would disagree with you. I would say it's very empowering to have that equalizing weapon, especially for a woman, to be able to defend herself against someone that could overpower her. I believe that's wholly proper, and that's a big reason of why the Second Amendment exists at all. So I have to disagree with you there. That's a very weak case to throw out there in a self-defense case. And so you repeat your statement, and is that all you have to say with it? So if that's the case, so if you were the one on the ground and he was coming at you and you had your gun, and were like, well, he doesn't have a gun, so I'm going to let him punch me in the face and maybe kill me because it wouldn't be fair otherwise. Is that the standard? Is that what we believe the standard of self-defense is? That's not how it works. So, no, I know I can't, and that's fine. And I'm not necessarily really trying to change mine so much. I'm just trying to understand if there is a true reason that someone can present to me that it wasn't self-defense. I'm willing to listen. I 100% agree with the verdict today. I absolutely do. It certainly was 100% legal for him to carry a weapon. Fair fight not with guns. Okay. Well, there's some truth to that in some ways. I mean, people did used to just go out back and sort it out. I don't know if I wholly agree with that or not, but here's another thing. Over the years, I've seen this case that violence is always bad, or violence is never the answer. And I completely disagree with that. There are times when righteous anger and righteous violence is needed. Because I'm telling you right now, if I'm walking down the street and I'm concealed carrying and I look down an alley and I see a woman getting raped, he's on the ground. If I go to jail for it, so be it. But I'm telling you right now, that's not going past my eyes. And any man out there who calls himself a man that wouldn't do that, I question whether or not you're one at all. Because it's despicable. It's despicable to think that there's never a case to defend someone else. But I'll leave that alone. I don't want to get pissed off. I usually don't. I have a pretty long fuse, but true injustices really do get to me. So, that being said, I don't know if anyone has put this in the chat that, does anyone know how to turn on my guest request again? If you do, I appreciate it. So I just got a question. Do I have a murder fantasy? I literally just said 10 or 15 minutes ago that I have no desire to use the AR-10 that I own for anything but hunting. I hope that I never have to use it for anything else. But if I have to, I certainly would. And that's just the reality of things. And people really nowadays, they don't understand how good it's been. I'm telling you right now, the kingdom of God has built to the point where us who live now have no idea how bad it used to be. You could just be going along the road and someone could kill you for your bag of food and no one would know. Or they could take your wife away from you and rape her in front of you and then kill her in front of you and then sell you into slavery. That's how things used to be. And we're so cushy now that we argue about whether or not someone has the right to defend themselves. It's preposterous. It's preposterous. So, anyway. But no, if anyone knows how to turn on the guest request, I'd be happy to. Turn it back on, and we could accept someone on to discuss openly here. ARs are not hunting weapons. That actually is true. They really weren't designed specifically for hunting. I have one because I've been using my father-in-law's 30-06 for hunting, and I wanted my own rifle, but I also wanted a home defense weapon. So I thought, well, what platform would be best for that? So I looked at an AR-15. I'm like, I'm not real happy with that round size. A 22 is pretty small for deer hunting. I do whitetail hunting. It can do the job if you get a really good clean shot, if you hit the heart, if you use hollow points, it helps. But I wanted an adaptable platform that I could use for different things. So if I wanted to do, I don't know, just sport shooting at targets, I could take that scope off. I could quickly put on a hollow sight or something like that. And I just wanted to have the adaptability of the AR platform, which was really nice. And I'm glad that I did that. So instead of spending my money on 2 or 3 different weapons, I bought one. And then I bought the accessories I needed to use that for. But I don't disagree with you that it wasn't designed specifically to be a hunting platform, but there's no reason why it can't be. So. Okay, well, let's see what we got here. The Second Amendment is in part for offense against tyranny. That's true. But if you read the end of it, reading where the commas are and things like that actually changes some of the interpretation that some people have about it. It is not just about that. It is also about the individual being able to have their own weapon and being able to use it to defend themselves and their community. I would protect and serve, but I wouldn't come out and carry a gun. See, that looking for trouble thing is a very strange argument because, for one, why on earth would you think that just having a weapon to defend yourself if you need it takes you the other way? That doesn't make sense either. So you would rather have people with a handgun hidden that you don't know, or would you rather have someone that's openly saying, I'm armed, here it is, you can see it, but I'm here to help? Because that's what he was doing. And that also wasn't even contested properly by the prosecution. So there's that. So a Satanist should open carry into a church? Depends on the place, depends on the church. I'd rather them open carry than concealed carry if they're planning on doing something illicit. Let's see here. Anyway, yeah. So when I heard the verdict today, I was very relieved, because the outcome being otherwise, I think would have started a precedent toward something that is very dark. If the standard for self-defense is lowered and lowered and lowered to the point where we become powerless, I think that it would get to a point where we're just no longer America anymore. And for those of you who are anti-America, if you're of the far left side of the aisle, you're welcome for having given you the freedom to have that. And that was done with righteous violence. Yeah, look at Australia's right, that they were able to be locked down to the point of not being able to leave their house at all, and they could do nothing about it. It's very alarming. I have a lot of people I correspond with in Canada as well, and some of the stuff that they tell me about even religious persecution is staggering. That's sad but true. Rosenbaum died what he liked doing, which was chasing minors. That's actually an accurate statement. I wish it didn't have to be that way, but he made his choice. And the footage of him throughout the day was pretty condemning. Um, who was being chased? Rosenbaum was being chased? You sure about that? Because the video made it 100% clear that Rosenbaum was chasing Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse turned and was taken. Gary, I'm not going to do that, bud. I'm sorry. Um, I'm doing my best to talk to the people that are on here. So, um, oh, Percy, you want to duel? That's cool. So I'm going to bring on my friend Percy. Where did it go? Oh, sorry, Percy. Actually, go ahead and do it again, bud. I missed the. Oh, wait a minute here. Oh, there we go. I figured out how to turn it back on. So, Percy, if you're in the chat, you can go ahead and pop that on. There we go. Hey, Percy, how you doing, buddy?
What's up, brother? How are you, man?
I'm just weathering the storm here. So yeah, Gary, no, Gary, again, no, it's not personal or anything. I'm trying to keep everything within TikTok for now. But I'd be happy to talk to you later offline if you want, man. Okay. Yeah, good to see you, man. I haven't talked to you in a long time. So yeah, Insanity Sector in the comments there. I've known him for a while. He's one of my brother's good friends. And he was also in the Marines. So, and
Oh,
thank
nice.
you for your service too, buddy. But yeah, so this whole thing, I had told myself I'm not going to get on Facebook because I know how that goes. And I got on Facebook and I looked right at the top of my feed and I'm like, so the person was like, if you agree with this or whatever, just unfriend me now. And I'm like, that's kind of what I was expecting to see. And so my response was that, do you mean that? And then this person went into it wasn't a tirade. It wasn't toxic or anything. It just made me very sad um, that many people really choose to live inside this echo chamber. Like they
Yeah.
refuse to listen to anything that disagrees with them so much that, I mean, are you familiar with groupthink, that term?
Not really.
So groupthink is it's kind of the result of an echo chamber. So everyone just kind of just agrees and doesn't really address it, and then everybody
Oh,
kind of moves forward with it.
conformity or like a hive mind. Okay, I
In
got
some
you.
ways, yeah, it's kind of just a false premise accepted without really thinking it through logically to the end. And that doesn't have
Mm,
to be one side or the other. That can be whatever a political persuasion that one person is. It can be anything. I
yeah,
mean, you could say something like, well, no, I don't want to use that one because TikTok might ban me. So let's say that there's a group that says there's one other group of people that are subhuman in some way. They're not actual
okay,
human.
yeah,
And the whole community of that people start to just accept that and it becomes the norm. Does that mean it's right? Just because a group of people, even a large group of people, believe that to be true, that doesn't make it morally
yeah,
true. That would make it subjectively true. But you and I both know, because I know you make the same argument I do with presuppositional apologetics, that there's objective morality. There has to be.
yeah,
Otherwise, why
yeah,
is anything wrong at all? Why couldn't I just go kill a puppy in the street and eat its brains out in public? Why does everybody go, oh,
yeah,
that's terrible? Because it's gross. It's terrible. And we all know it.
yeah,
It's all written in our hearts. But people just refuse to accept it so often, you know? But what you got?
yeah.
You got some
um.
opinion? Sure you do.
Well, your comments are crazy right now. I was kind of watching that, and
Yeah.
one thing I noticed. I mean, I agree with you on all accounts. It seems like a number of people who are in disagreement with the decision and outcome. It seems like they want him to be just want Kyle to be utterly defenseless and not defend himself. And I think he conducted himself accordingly. The outcome is unfortunate. But on the other hand, what I was wondering is, are should we, let's say protests are still going on, and like there, what was it? There was I think $1.9 billion in damages from protesters.
Yeah.
That's
We
insane.
can say
Should we just
rioters.
let them destroy the country?
No.
No,
And we can say
no.
rioters here. So the people that did those kind of things were rioters. I don't
Mm,
blanket everyone that's in the area in that way. I would certainly say that there were people that were protesting for what they believe in, and I wholeheartedly support that, even if I disagree with them. I want people to use their voice to express their opinion and concern, which is part of why I came on here. I want people to tell me their opinion as to why they think differently than I do. I welcome that.
yeah,
That's part of what's beautiful about this country. That's why the First Amendment exists. We want that. We need that. But when it turns into violence and lawlessness, you've crossed the line. It's a whole different conversation at that
yeah.
point. It isn't about your cause anymore. What are
Hmm.
you tearing
Yeah,
down? If you were tearing down an institution that you disagreed with, okay, so let's say that you're an anti-corporatist or something like that. And you go, Starbucks is the devil, and you want to go up against Starbucks. Why would you go to the corner Starbucks and beat it up? What's going to happen? You're hurting a franchise small business owner and the people that work there in your community. Are you hurting Starbucks corporate? They'd be like, looks like there was a discrepancy in this 1.5 billionth store that we have. It's not going to matter to them. If you have an issue, use your voice and go after the corporate machine. I can respect that. But the people that are just burning down small businesses, even if they're chains, you're doing nothing.
yeah. Well, they're doing something. It's just detrimental to society and people. Um, and I, man, I just want to reiterate what you said, that the last, I don't know, 100 years or less have been the most peaceful, I think, in history, and
Yeah.
the prior so many
All of human
thousands of
history.
years has been
It's a downward
intensely
slope if you go back
violent.
in time.
Oh my
For
gosh.
sure.
And Americans are almost entirely completely oblivious to what it used to be. And I think now that we have kids that are raised up in this generation of entitlement and protection and um, etc., they don't understand that this is we have such a beautiful and precious thing, especially in this nation. Um, so, anyways, okay, that's all I have for now.
That's fair.
I just want to get
Yeah,
wanted to get
man.
on and make that point, and
I agree with you.
kind of tip my hat to you, man. You're an intelligent man, and
I
I
appreciate that.
I fully agree.
I'm not gonna lie. There's an IG group of a bunch of believers, and I said, "Hey guys, I'm about to throw myself into the lion's den here. So if you could pray for me a little, I'd appreciate it." I'm just trying to keep my cool if I can, because when you come across as angry, you're not gonna sway anyone's mind. If I'm just here
Yeah,
yelling at people in the chat, they're gonna go, "Oh, you're exactly what I think you are."
yeah,
Whatever label you want to put on me, I suppose. But but yeah.
yeah,
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I have my small moments.
yeah.
But
Well, um. So anyway, I haven't watched the entirety of the case. I caught pieces.
sure.
What uh what were the all of the charges against him? So I didn't
So
understand the barrel.
oh, the thing with the very end that they presented in the closing statement.
Yeah,
So it was 4 counts of murder. They were saying murder, which implies premeditation, which implies intent to kill without provocation. There's a lot of caveats to that. So if the prosecution was smarter, I think they would have gone for a manslaughter charge for maybe, I would say, one of them. Um, and that was because the first guy didn't get that many blows in before he fired.
The
Uh,
skateboard guy and the last guy that he fired on with the pistol, um, those are pretty clear. The first one was maybe questionable, but for that, but even then, I don't think it would have held. There was a fifth count, which was a gun charge about them saying that it was illegal for him to have the rifle at all. And that one was dismissed before the closing statements even happened. And the reason it was is
uh,
because by law, it's a 16-inch barrel, or I think it was 28-inch total length of the weapon. You're permitted to
okay.
carry one at 17. So
Okay.
wholly
Beautiful.
he was wholly legal in carrying that. Now, if he hadn't been, that would have been a legitimate charge. And if
Yeah.
he didn't have a permit or some special permit for it, well, the law is the law. I would have agreed with them if they'd have found him guilty of that one. But nothing about what he had was illegal. And he was open carrying. It's actually illegal to not have a permit in concealed carry. And guess what? The
Mm.
last guy who was shot in the bicep, he didn't have his conceal and carry, and he was concealing and carrying.
Well, how about that?
Well, how about that?
Can't say I'm
Um,
surprised.
yeah, but no, what you were talking about with the picture. So they took a picture and zoomed it all the way in, so it was super pixelated. And there's a program that they use. I forget the name of it. That is used to take the colors in other pixels that are nearby and attempt to fill in the gaps to sharpen an image.
Okay.
So what they were attempting to say was is that he actually pointed his weapon up at Rosenbaum. So here's the deal with that. So throughout all of the footage, he is right hand carrying. So I'm right handed. So pistol grip here, straight finger off of your trigger, and then your thumb around the back of the pistol grip. And then your other
Yeah.
hand generally is on the guard at the front of the weapon. So if he had the gun up at all, it was right here, right handed. When he was not in a position like this, it was down and he was hands free, which is why he had the 3-point strap. So
Yeah.
in the footage that's being referred to there, he was carrying a fire extinguisher. He puts the fire extinguisher down, and they're saying that he pointed the weapon at Rosenbaum. Well, in the
Uh,
image, he would have had to have done so left-handed. So to
yeah.
do that, that means it isn't just pulling the weapon around. He's actually having to turn it all the way over to flip around the middle of where the 3-point strap was, and then go
Yeah.
left-handed, which means his ejection chamber is pointing at his face.
Right.
So if he had had a fire, it would have been just popping him in the face, and he probably would have blinded himself because you do get some gas and some fire coming back from the chamber a little bit from that
Yeah.
fire. And then in 1 second, when he started to run, he reversed all that back into right hand grip,
Mm-hmm.
all in a split
Okay.
second. It's completely
Yeah.
unreasonable to think that he would have done that.
Yeah.
So that's all that was. And not to mention, even if that were true, the pixelated image in the manual for the program that was used to produce that image, it says cannot be used in a court of law. So it was
Hmm.
inadmissible anyway. So what's interesting,
Yeah.
and I think the judge was smart on this, he actually sat on three big points. He sat on two mistrial requests, and he sat on whether or not that was an admissible evidence. He let it pass for the deliberations of the jury, and I think what he wanted to do is allow the jury to speak and give their ruling, their verdict rather, before he made
Okay.
any of those conclusions. Because by letting it go this way, imagine what would have happened if he'd have just called a mistrial. People would have cried foul that the state is doing this and he's being protected by, Big Brother or whatever. But instead, the judge was smart
Yeah.
and he let it play out and he said, okay, so there's no need for any of these requests anymore. The matter is
Mm.
settled. I think that was a smart move. Does that answer your question
Hmm.
though about the image?
Yeah. Yeah. That gives me some clarity. I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah.
I gotta say, man, I'm impressed with Kyle's conduct because I certainly was not where he is at 17. or
I
even
have a
older.
hard time. Even a trained Marine, I don't know that they would have had that kind of restraint. Because he honestly,
Yeah,
the first time or I should say the second time when he had left the first site and he was running toward the police line, he was attacked, if I'm not mistaken, 3 different times, and he was actually knocked to the ground and turned around with his weapon to try and to assess the threats. And then he didn't fire. He got up and he kept running.
yeah.
Unbelievable restraint, in my opinion. It's hard to say whether or
Because
not I would have done that in that situation where it's all adrenaline, your heart's pounding, and
yeah,
split second
yeah, I would
decisions,
think,
life or death. Oof.
yeah, I think the natural reaction will be to get up and kind of have your gun leading the way where you're looking, but it seemed like he was really safe.
More people certainly could have lost their life that night, and he probably would have still been justified in having done so. I'm very,
Hmm.
very glad that there was one guy that was running up to him, and he saw the weapon, and he kind of was like, maybe not, and he backed up. I mean, he was only like 3 or 4 feet away from him, but he put his hands up, and he backed away,
Yeah,
and Kyle didn't fire. And
yeah.
he, got his bearings, and he got up, and then he started continuing on to run away.
Seeing
I
that
mean, that's
guy that
restraint.
was coming after you with that kind of orangish profile picture, whatever his name was, he was saying that Kyle was looking for people to hurt and kind of going along that um, logic. And I hadn't seen all of the videos, so I don't know for sure. But now that you say that, that kind of puts that to rest.
Well, I can tell you something.
So
If he was going out to take people out, for one, he didn't use all his rounds. For two,
yeah,
that weapon is capable of pretty good range. A max
oh yeah,
effective range for a
hundreds of yards.
22. Yeah, max effective range is 800 yards. I don't know. I
Okay,
didn't really look too much at his optics. I think he might have just had irons on there, but if you had a
okay,
scope, you could probably hit something at 800 yards with a scope. In the Marines,
yeah,
when I was using the M16A2, which is a similar platform, it's just set up a little different. It has a 3 round burst function.
okay,
We actually fired on the range testing at 500 yards, open sights. So the weapon was
okay,
capable of long range. So if you wanted to just start picking people off, it'd have been
yeah,
easy. It would have
yeah,
definitely been easy, but he didn't. That wasn't what he was there for. And his conduct made it clear that that wasn't what he was there for. But people want to believe what they believe. It's like, no, he has to have been doing that because that's what I've been told. Or no, that's what goes along with the narrative of the MAGA wearing white kid going after, and he didn't even shoot anyone who was of color. It
oh
was all
yeah,
white
yeah.
people
I think
involved here.
it's what I've seen most of my life is CNN and all these places have these ridiculous talking points, and everybody, a lot of people just kind of run with it and kind of just regurgitate what they heard, and until they come to things like this where you're actually kind of thinking a situation through, that matters. You can't just say anything.
If you can
So
divide
anyway,
people and make them afraid, they can be controlled.
yeah, easily. And that's something I'm so it was a big learning point for me to see the conduct and the minds of people over the last year and a half. I'm amazed how many people just conform. And there's a show on Netflix called Brain Games that has an episode about conformity, and it's amazing to see what people will just go along with because of the way the mind is wired. It's almost like saying no. Like no is one of the hardest words for people to say. Well, conforming with the crowd that is doing whatever the crowd is doing, it's really hard for people to go against the grain and do something else. So whatever. Just gotta educate people. So I just want to get on and say those few things. I'm about to head into work.
Cool, man.
So
Well, stay safe.
thanks
Good
for,
talking to you as
for
always.
bringing me on for a second here.
Yeah, bro. Have a good night, dude.
All right, you too. I'll see you later.
So yeah, if you don't follow Percy, go ahead and do so. He puts out great content, does great lives, guys. So
Give him a follow if you don't already. Okay, so I have figured out how to do guest requests. So here's a request I have for all of you watching. If you disagree with the verdict today, if you have in your mind what is solid evidence as to why Kyle Rittenhouse was actually guilty of murder and why it was not self-defense, I do invite you to put in a guest request and we can talk about it. I'm happy to hear opinions. My request to any of you who do is I would appreciate keeping speech clean and being civil. And I'll pledge to you the same courtesy. So if any of you would like to do a guest request, I'm happy to talk to you. So that being said, just continuing on here, I don't see. So I kind of go through briefly what I went through at the very beginning of the live, because I assume that we might have filtered through the people that were here at the beginning toward people that are here now. So what I said at the beginning was, with this particular trial, I decided to only listen to the live raw feed. I didn't listen to a news source with commentary telling me about what was going on or trying to give their spin or whatever. I listened to the direct feed and just listened to the defense and prosecution cases as they were presented, and of course, the judge. So that being said, after the fact, the two sources that I listen to news-wise are Daily Wire, because they are a moderate, right-leaning, kind of libertarian lean, and they tend to be more honest, and they will retract stories openly and publicly if they get something wrong, which I respect. And then on the other side of the aisle, I listen to Tim Pool and his organization, Timcast, for a moderate liberal view on things, but he also leans libertarian. So neither of those groups are on the fringes or the extremes. They actually have a lot in common that they do agree with. And then there's certain things, either fiscally or, some of those other issues that divide people's opinion politically, that they disagree with. But the difference is they're willing to speak about it and talk about it without resorting to ad hominem, without just being name calling and yelling and back and forth. That's the kind of discussion and rhetoric that I want to see come back, because it's sad to me when I see people on Facebook saying, "Hey, if you think this, go ahead and unfriend me. Hey, if you think this, you're the problem." I mean, that's not productive. Well, you can believe what you wish about Tim Pool. That's just fine. I'm not sure what point you're trying to make, because if you're on the liberal side, he worked for Vice. He supported and reported on the Occupy Wall Street movement. So I'm not sure exactly what point you're trying to make. If you're leaning toward the left, well, he calls himself liberal. And he actually supported Bernie Sanders in the primaries last run around. So I'm not sure. And anyway, you're welcome to your opinion. I'm a propagandist. So what does it benefit me by having these opinions? Because someone that is engaging in propaganda would have a motive towards some kind of gain, would they not? And what gain do I have to come on here and have people disagree with me openly? There's really not much gain here. I'm actually I'm waiting for someone to come on and tell me why they believe that he was guilty and give me a reason, a logical reason, a legal reason as to why. And I'm not seeing anybody able to step up and do that. If you're the one who can, I welcome you to exchange words with me here, peacefully and civilly, but up to you. So for those of you on, if you wouldn't mind just double tapping the screen for me, I want to have as many people come into the conversation as possible from all walks of opinions. So if you don't mind doing that, I'd appreciate it. But again, so just let me see if someone. Okay, so I have one person come on. So Arizona, I have a request of you if you would. If you would keep the speech clean and the conversation civil, I'm happy to talk to you. So I will be bringing on. I pledge to do the same. How's it going there? How you doing?
I don't want to waste your time. I'm probably not what you're looking for. I just want to say God bless Kyle, and I'm glad that he got off. I'm glad that he's not guilty.
Okay, well, fair enough. I agree with you.
I don't want to waste your time. I just wanted to say that. So have a good day.
Okay. You too, bud. Nice meeting you. Take care. So far, Nick. So if you disagree, and you have a logical or legal reason as to why you disagree, I'm happy to listen. If you have something to say. So it looks like I might have another. Give me just a second here. Legally godless. Okay. Well, I would ask the same request of you that I asked before. If you're willing to have a clean and civil discussion, I'll bring you up.
Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Doing well. How are you?
Oh, been better, been worse, you know. Ups and downs like life goes. So are you of the side that disagrees with the decision, or do you agree with the decision today?
So, in part, I disagree. I definitely disagree with count one. I always thought count three, after I heard the testimony, was pretty much not guilty. I
Is that
basically
was
think
the skateboard one? Does that count three?
Yeah, the guy that's still alive.
Okay. Oh, so that not the skateboard one. So you're talking I think that might have been four, but the bicep, that guy.
Right.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, because he testified to having his weapon pointed at him, and I agree that pretty much destroyed that particular one. So so what is it about count one that leads you to the other side of that decision?
My understanding is that Rittenhouse approached Rosenbaum first, told him to stop doing what he was doing, well armed, and then, well, he didn't shoot him at that point. Drew his weapon, and that's when the other guy, Rosenbaum, chased after him. Wasn't that the testimony?
Okay. That's partially right. So he was open carrying. So there wasn't a point where he drew or withdrew his weapon. It was on a 3-point strap. And that the purpose of that was to be able to go hands-free to provide medical assistance, but also to not have to literally carry the weapon the whole time. Because the strap that I have on my AR-10 is just a single strap, and that means that you can just shoulder the weapon with the strap in front of your shoulder, just specifically to carry it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now, as far as what you said about him approaching him, to what I understand, you're not incorrect on that. He did approach him and ask him not to engage in destructive behavior to the property that he was attempting to defend. But
So,
go ahead.
When an officer, which this child wasn't,
Sure,
comes and gives you an order, part of that authority that he's giving you an order for, yeah, it comes from the state, but part of it is that gun. That gun is an implicit threat. By him going up to somebody, ordering them to do something, equipped with a rifle, of which the caliber will do significant damage.
That was a 22. That's actually a pretty small round. A 22 or a 5.56 millimeter that's the AR-15 round. To put it into perspective, my AR-10 is a 308 Winchester, and most hunting rifles are 30-06, which is not quite, but I'd say maybe 40% a larger round and much more powerful. It's not really that powerful. Most handguns are actually stronger at short range. But go ahead.
My 22 is more than capable of taking a man down.
Oh yes, it can certainly kill. Absolutely. Well, that was demonstrated that very night.
So that part's not in question. But go ahead.
So he goes and orders somebody that he has no authority to order, telling them what to do.
Why does he have no authority to order? I mean, it's not, you're saying order, but it's not, he's saying he's requesting essentially. And it was a defensive property. So if someone was attacking your car and you told them not to, and you pulled out your pistol and said, "Stop attacking my car," is that improper?
No, it's my car.
Sure. And he was given the authority to defend that property from the owner of that property, as was testified, right?
Yeah, see, that's the thing. That part wasn't very convincing to me that, like, oh, well,
Okay.
you know, it's a car lot. This isn't like my home property. So in my state, if I was worried about myself, yes, I could draw my gun. So in your hypothetical, if someone was attacking my car while I'm in it, I'm not sure if they might be attacking me next. So that's why I have the possibility.
What if you're not in it? What if it's your friend's car?
If it's my friend's car, we're in a public place, I don't think I get to pull my gun out on somebody and say stop.
Why?
Because property can't be defended with deadly force.
You're not incorrect. That is correct. So if he had fired at him, he would have been charged and probably convicted, and I would have agreed with that charge. I agree with that. If he had fired, but he came up and said, "Stop doing that." Right? He didn't fire them.
And this is why I think that they should have lost on count 1 and count 2.
Okay.
When you present a firearm to an individual, that in of itself is typically a threat. It's one of the reasons why you're considered under a detention by the police, even when they don't say you're under arrest. It's because of that intimidating factor of a firearm.
So that would be true if it were a conceal and carry situation. So if he'd have walked up to him without anything on him and say, "Stop doing that. This is private property and you're destroying it." And the guy said, "No, F you, I'm gonna F and kill you," like he said. And then he pulled out a handgun and said, "I'm telling you to stop right now." The laws are slightly different for that, because then you are brandishing a firearm that was concealed. Like I said earlier, his was open carry right in front of him. So as he approached, everything was visible. There was nothing hidden, if you will. And now, granted, the law is slightly different from state to state on that point, but in Wisconsin specifically, that was one big reason why the weapons charge was dropped. But most of it was the length of the gun and his age, and all that lined up with the law properly. But that second part was also a big part of it, because if it had been a handgun, it would have been illegal for him to have had it. And if it was concealed and he brandished it, that would have been another different thing. So if that had been the case, I would agree with you. Does that make sense?
I see where you're coming from. But for me, I think that he had brandished it enough to be a threat. And then the person involved had the right to defend himself, which would include chasing and disarming the person who brandished the weapon.
Okay, so I'm sorry to interrupt, but so why the chasing part? So if Rittenhouse turned and ran and presented his back to the person, why the need for him to run after him and further the threat toward his own life?
How far away do you think someone can shoot you from with a rifle?
Depends on the skill, but that's a fair point. So you were saying his fear was that he was going to turn around and fire into a crowd to hit the one target?
Rifle is actually more of a danger further away than they are in close quarters. In close quarters, a person with a rifle, if I'm right up next to them, they actually are going to be very unlikely to be able to shoot me.
I don't disagree with that.
If I get close in, they're going to be able to shoot me really well. So no, if somebody was running away with a AR-15, I would assume they were trying to get a better vantage point to shoot me from. So I would not disengage. I would continue following after them.
It's not a bad point, but it is very speculative, and I would say in a court of law it'd be very difficult to prove that. And the second part of that is, I would wonder why the prosecution didn't make that same argument, because I didn't hear that argument being made.
So
I'm sorry, what?
this,
You cut out.
this prosecutor sucks. So let me tell you, I did not. This is why I dialed in. I think the prosecutor just did not know how to do his job. His cross examination didn't follow under what's called Posner Dodd. Now that kind of happens sometimes when you don't have a deposition or a transcript, like you wouldn't with Mr. Rittenhouse, because you couldn't force him to testify before trial. But
Sure.
one thing that could have easily happened, that video where he was saying, "Oh, I would love to have my AR and shoot those people," never got played. And it rightfully shouldn't have been played because it's not relevant. But since he took the stand, you could ask him these simple questions. You could say, "You actually think that you should be allowed to shoot rioters or people that you deem that are rioters?" Sorry, I got some kids in the background. And he could say,
right.
"Yeah, I do think that." Or he could say no. And if he says no, then you get to play the video as impeachment testimony. And that didn't happen, which tells me this prosecutor either doesn't know how to impeach people or in general just didn't give a shit. Now, I hope it's not the second one. I think he's just incompetent. He probably doesn't know how to do it. If you hadn't guessed, I'm a lawyer. That's the legally part of the legally godless. But he did horrible job cross-examining Rittenhouse.
I agree with you there. I attributed that kind of deficiency more commonly to incompetence than to actual malice. And I agree that he was unprepared in having presented and filed for those charges. So I actually agree with you in that regard. That made it, to me, a little bit better of an argument than anything I saw him present. So it's kind of ironic that on a TikTok live, someone I randomly met makes a better argument, in my opinion, than a state prosecutor. But I still disagree with you. But I still think that would still be a point that would be worthy of discussion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I really think that we might have at least had maybe one. I also don't think it's murder one. I think it's probably murder two.
So unintentional, like a manslaughter kind of a thing.
Well, at the end of the day, I do
because
believe that
there had to be motive.
Yeah, I do believe he thought he was in danger, but my opinion is he should not have been able to use self-defense because for the first and second ones, I think he was the initial aggressor. Now the third,
you said the second one. So the second one was him running away, right?
Yeah, but after you shoot someone, like let's say this: somebody is a school shooter, right? So I'm at a school, and I have shot someone. I've killed someone, and then another student who is told I'm the shooter. That guy just killed someone. Comes and disarms me. Do I get to defend myself against that guy?
No, but that's kind of a false premise because that would be someone going in with the intent to specifically kill and cause harm, which that case would be hard pressed to be made for Rittenhouse. Now, negating a self-defense is slightly different than proving intent. So, I mean, you yourself just said that you would be more on the murder 2 charge, meaning it was an unintentional homicide. Am I hearing you right?
Correct, but I mean that doesn't.
The premise would have been that there was clear intent, and then someone was coming out to take out the active shooter. If that was the case, I'm wholly on board with you, and I would be the one happy to pull the trigger. Not happy, but I would be the one willing to pull the trigger on that shooter if it was that clear cut. Right. But I think that's kind of a false premise. So it's not a great metaphor for this one, in my opinion.
I understand it's not a perfect metaphor, and I'd probably find something better than a school shooting if I had more. But
of course,
that's why it's like the one who testified, he's like, "Yeah, I pointed my gun," and that's when he lifted his gun.
Right.
I have a hard time seeing that as self-defense. So I think
from someone pointing a weapon at you while you're on the ground.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think at that point, that fourth guy, the guy who lived, I think that one was rightfully decided because during the testimony, that guy admitted, "Yeah, I barreled him before he barreled me."
Yeah, I agree with you there. Sure.
I kind of think that one's self-defense, But I have finished cooking, and I got to feed my kids. It's been a lovely conversation.
Oh yeah, I appreciate you being civil, man. Nice meeting you. Take care.
Good night.
See, that's what I'm looking for, everyone. Those kind of conversations.
I'm happy with someone to disagree with me. It's just fine, as long as we have a productive conversation. That was really good. He actually made a pretty good point at the beginning. I still disagree. I don't think that would have held up. I still don't think that he instigated any of that. And for someone to say, so that here's a couple of assumptions that we would have to make with the premise that he presented there. You would have to say, okay, Rosenbaum had enough knowledge of weaponry to know that AR-15 has a max effective range of 800 yards and a normal firing range of 500 yards, and that if he keeps running that way and he gets behind a vehicle and can get prone in some way and set up a good position, he can probably snipe me out. I don't know. That's a lot of assumptions. Is it impossible? No. I wouldn't say that that's an impossible case to make. That probably would have been a decent premise to have presented in some way during the initial deliberations and the witness testimony before a closing statement. But what's interesting is it was never made at all. And the whole premise of the case changed in the closing statement altogether, which that alone is mind-blowing. I've never seen the prosecution work in that way. They start with the premise, typically, and they start to build that narrative with each witness that's presented over and over and over and keep driving home a point in the minds of the jurors. And then in their closing statements, they drop all of the bombs throughout the entire case to lay out that final, here it is, and here's driving my point home. Meanwhile, that's not what happened at all. Throughout each of the witness testimonies, the testimony itself, many of the time on against the defender, blew their case apart, especially the last one that we just mentioned, where the defense attorney said, so he didn't pull up his weapon until you pointed your pistol at his head, correct? And the guy said, famously, correct. That pretty much blew that last one out of the water. So for anyone to think that the last count was murder, I just don't see, even from the mouth of the person who got his bicep blown off, rightfully, even he said that he pointed the weapon at him. That's just how it goes with that. But he had to change his case after each bomb was dropped. After each time the case blew up in his face, he had to come up with something else. And then in the closing argument, he presented, rightfully wrong, I would say, or wrongfully so, that edited piece of evidence, the picture that was the pixelated one, and changed the whole premise of the final part of the case in the closing statement. I mean, any of you have ever watched debate? I'm someone that watches theological debates from time to time. They work in some ways a lot like a court case does, where you have testimony, but the testimony is from the debater, and then you have cross-examination, and they go back and forth. It's very rare for me to see, I don't know that I ever have, where the entire opening statement has nothing to do with the closing statement of that person that's debating. Very strange for that to have been the case if in a debate. And in this case, that's exactly what we saw. He was grasping at straws at the end. And I know that's an opinion, me saying it that way, and that's fair. But he changed the premise of the case at the end, trying to prove some kind of intent or provocation on the defender's part, rather than trying to just do it by the letter of the law, which was made clear that he was not in violation of. So, yeah, but that was a nice conversation. If anyone has another point to make, and you're willing to have a civil conversation, I'm willing to have it here. So 56 Teeth, you're making a lot of pretty bold claims here, and you're not offering much. You're not offering much evidence to support them. So if you're able to actually provide something of truth, something of substance, we can certainly discuss it, but you're really just making outlandish claims. And where was the white supremacy here? The whole thing was involving white people. There was no people of color that were shot at or killed. They went through the phone, they went through the social media of Rittenhouse and found no evidence of racism or white supremacy or this, that, or the other, even MAGA. There wasn't even really Trump stuff in there if you wanted to go down that route. And it wasn't presented by the prosecution. If there was some hint of that, the prosecution would have been all over it, because this was one of the biggest politicized cases for quite a long time. So why didn't the prosecution, and you're saying, what was the demonstration about? Well, demonstration's a pretty loose term considering they were setting billions of dollars worth of buildings on fire, and houses, residential houses with children in them. But why wouldn't the prosecution bring up those points if that were true? So if you should be mad at anybody, if you believe that that's true and that there is white supremacy there, in a court of law, why would you not present that? You should be mad at the prosecutor. So I reframe the demonstration. So tell me what part of the statement is wrong. There were people that went out protesting something that they believed in. There were many others that went out and set things on fire and committed riots. Which part of that statement's wrong? It wasn't. That's what was happening. What's the simple question? Because here's the thing. You're creating a premise that everybody that was out that day was there for one thing, and they were not there for one thing. Because Rosenbaum, he was using the N-word all throughout the day. He was a serial pedophile who had raped 5 different times boys 9 to 11 years old. So do you really think that's what it was all about with everybody that was out there? So you're trying to paint the premise that it was about either BLM or it was about the, which case was it? Was it the Jacob Blake one? The one where he digitally raped a young woman and was breaking a, what was it? What are those called? I forget what they're called, but he had broken multiple laws and then was wielding a weapon and refusing to drop it. We'll leave that one alone. That's a whole other conversation. But do you really believe, and you can honestly say, that everyone that was out that day was there for that reason? Restraining order. Thank you, Stacy. Yeah. Thank you all for correcting my old brain that doesn't want to completely work all that well. I just answered your question. That's all you can bring, huh? Okay. Well, we'll leave that alone. So again, does anyone in the chat here disagree with the decision that was made today? And if you do, and you have a premise to present, I'd be happy to talk with you about it in a civil and calm tone, which I hope that I've been expressing throughout this live. Does anyone want to hop on? And if you do, if you have 1,000 followers, and you'd like to guest request, feel free to do so. I'd be happy to talk about it. This is what's interesting. So all of you that are on here, I typically don't talk much about politics, even though I have, opinions about most things. I like to think that I'm fairly well informed on most goings on. But I actually tend to talk more about theology, and some philosophy and things like that more often than anything. So it's very strange that that I'm having this much response to this. I shouldn't say it's strange. I mean, politics and things like that and big cases like this just brings a lot of attention. But I actually tend to talk about other things that I find more pleasant. But today I was pleased that the laws that were brought to us from Judaism specifically, so Levitical laws, that I don't know if a lot of you realize this, but nearly all of the United States law really does come from Levitical and Deuteronomy. Can't say the word. Law. So the multiple witnesses, the innocent until proven guilty, all of those things, equal weights and measures, those kind of things all come from the Mosaic law. So I'm very thankful of Israel and the Jewish people for having preserved God's word in that way, and God made it in such a way as to where his gospel spread that word over the globe until it eventually reached America and influenced the founders here. And we have today a far more fair and efficient system of governance. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. There's plenty that could be better, much, much better. But it is far better now than it has ever been in the history of mankind. And I know it seems tough to say that because we see violence still. We see things on the news and it all seems just terrible, right? Well, here's the thing. We've only had televisions for 70 years? Something like that. We've had radio for longer, of course. But most things that would happen were local issues. If someone, even the case that just happened right now, that was really a local issue. It was a local self-defense case that got blown up into a national media circus and politicized in such a way because of the nature of media now. So because we see all of these things, it seems like every day there's another case and another case of this, that, and the other. Well, that's because we're seeing all of the local cases now. So in some ways it might seem to some that it's worse now. But if you look at the plight of, let's say, African Americans, there's certainly things now that are terrible in regards to that demographic. But compare that to even 20 or 30 years ago, especially if you go back to the 60s and earlier. I mean, you had Jim Crow laws and all of these horrible things that were in the books, in the law, that were completely not righteous, not correct, inhuman. And those have been rescinded. Those have been put down. Again, I'll say it again. Could it be better? It certainly could. There are people far smarter than me that could make the case as to how. But for anyone living in America now, you're living in a place and a time that's exponentially better than anything in the past and really anywhere in the world. I would be hard pressed for anyone to present to me a place or a time in the world where you would want to live that's better than what you have here. I'm willing to listen if you can make a good case, but because of how things have progressed, and in my worldview, because of the spread of the gospel and the spread of God's law and the spread of Christianity, because of that, people have become more civilized. They have become more reasonable. The nature of people is always toward sinful behavior and bad things, absolutely. But it's becoming less and less and less. I have a very optimistic view of history in the future. I see an upward trend. I believe that the kingdom of God is being built and cultivated. I would like it to go faster. And I'm saying that to myself just as much as anyone else. But if the church would rise up, if we would really love our neighbor, if we would really preach the gospel, if we would really reflect what the Bible says rather than what some prosperity gospel in a stupid pulpit in a mega church says, if we would truly adhere to the teachings of Christ, wow. It would be a night and day difference. But we don't, sadly. We're humans. But anyway, wow. I feel very bad for you, 56 Teeth, that you think that that's what history truly looks like. I would encourage you to actually study a little bit more. and take a look at history. Every science advancement, I shouldn't say every, but most every science advancement has been made from Christians. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not here to argue that point right now. But anyway, so again, I haven't seen any requests pop up, but are there any people who disagree with the verdict today that would like to present a premise as to why he was not defending himself and it was murder, or why the verdict was incorrect? If any of you would like to guest request, if you do have 1,000 followers, I'm happy to have you on. I do say a lot. It's a weakness of mine. I just did it. Whenever I make videos, I'm conscious of it now. I was called out by a couple of brothers and saying, "Hey, video content's great, but and they're like, yeah, I got you. Okay, that's fair. I can take it." But yeah, if anyone has a good argument, a good premise to bring up, I'm happy to debate it. So. I believe that he certainly was innocent of murder, and that it. Now I'm going to think about it every time I say you got me. I do believe that it was self-defense in all of the cases. I think it was a proper verdict. Let's see. Well, 56, I think we've all had enough of your toxicity, so I'm going to call it a day for you, bud. I put up with him for a good hour, so I let him say his piece. So if you think I wasn't justified in booting him, well, that's fair. But yeah, anything anyone would like to bring up? Argue that murder is okay? Absolutely not. So you're presenting what I'm assuming is a case that he committed murder. So the prosecution failed to make that case. So I would ask you, what premise do you have that he is guilty of murder, and how would you make that proof? Self-defense is not murder. Absolutely right. We need to understand what murder is and what self-defense is. So murder is premeditated. So, I mean, the Ten Commandments, it doesn't actually translate best to thou shalt not kill. If you look reading the King James, you shall not commit murder is actually a much better way to say that. Murder is premeditated. It's an act of vengeance. It's an act of malice. It's an act of hate. So if you ban semi-auto firearms, that means all you have left is bolt action and revolvers, which arguably could still be considered semi-automatic. So either you don't know much about firearms, or you're just kind of parroting the whoever you want to say. Anyway, so murder is premeditated. So self-defense means that someone is attacking you and threatening your life in such a way where you have to defend yourself. But it's not that you want them to die or want them dead. You just need to stop the threat against your life. Okay, so we do have a guest request here. So we have official, I can't see the rest, MAC. So my request of you would be if you would keep the chat clean, and you would speak in civil tone respectfully. I pledge to do the same for you. So if you would do that, I would appreciate it. We can talk.
Yeah, I'm not. Can you hear me?
How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. But yeah, I'm not here to argue or debate or anything. I actually have a question. So, like,
Fire away.
Obviously, per the law, he was justified in his actions. In that moment, in that moment, he was defending himself. I'm not arguing that. I'm just curious as to, nobody really spoke on the accountability aspect of it. Because, I mean, it can be argued that when he initially went out there, he may not have had the best intentions. We cannot prove that he intended to kill anybody, but I do feel that there should have been some accountability, even if obviously if it wasn't like jail time or anything, because that can be a bit drastic. However, there was no discussion of any type of accountability, at least not from what I heard.
Well, okay, so we'll say this. So when they were trying to present the premise as to why he was out there in the first place. So obviously we know what the media said. The media made this story that he was some MAGA hat wearing racist, this, that, or the other, grabbed a gun, brought it across state lines, and went out on patrol looking to kill whoever disagreed with him, whether it be someone of another race or someone of another political persuasion. That was the story that we were told by the media. I don't think anyone can test that, right? What we heard in the court trial, that story, that entire premise, was never presented by the prosecution. It was never brought across state lines. It was not an illegal firearm. They dropped that charge altogether. So all that really remained from that entire narrative was the question, why did he go out in the first place? And that was actually brought up, that particular question. Okay. So what was testified by multiple people, this included his friend, that Dominic Black, I think was his last name. So the owner of that business had asked Dominic, hey, can you defend in some way my property, just by kind of standing out there and just deterring people away? And he said, yeah. And so he called upon his friends, and that's what they did. So the owner of the business asked, now, was he asked directly? And that was brought up in the case. Did he ask Kyle directly? It doesn't seem like he did ask him directly. So that's a fair point to be made. The business owner didn't directly ask Kyle one-on-one. We'll leave that one. That's fair. But he was out there with the premise of two things. One is to open carry the rifle to deter people from coming in and possibly causing harm to people or to property. Not with the intent to necessarily shoot or kill any of those people, just to deter them. And that's done all the time. I mean, people standing guard with a rifle, someone's like, okay, I kind of want to run in there, but that guy's probably going to be able to mess me up pretty bad. And they just go, nah, I'm not going to do it. Right? That's fair. So that was the reason. The other one, he brought a medical kit and he had medical training, which was not contested. He was not an EMT. And I think that he had said somewhere that he was an EMT. So if you say emergency medical training, that's one way to say it. But saying you're an actual EMT, as in like in an ambulance, that wasn't proper. But we'll leave that one alone too. So those were testified as the two intentions why he was out there, was to deter violence and to deter harm to property, and then to provide medical attention, just at least on a surface level, to people who needed it, which he actually did. There was a lady that her ankle was twisted and he helped her. Right. He had a bunch of extra gauze and things like that. Sorry, I don't want to just dominate the conversation here, but that was testimony as to what the reason was that he was out there in the first place. There was never really anything stated as to or proven or even really cited by any of the witnesses saying he was out there for malicious reasons.
Right.
If they had been able to prove that, I think it would have been a different case. I mean, if I was a juror, I'd say, okay, they made a strong case that he was out there with the intention of doing something bad to someone else. But the case wasn't made. And the jury obviously didn't see it that way. So I guess that's why I would maybe disagree with that. I guess it also depends on what you mean on accountability. Accountability, of course, would be, a proper punishment for a proper crime. And I would just have to hear the premise of what the actual crime committed was, that it was a crime in the legal sense as well, and then what proper punishment would fit that crime. Does that make sense?
Okay, so I heard everything. Sorry. It makes sense. So I don't really. But anyway, I have another question before I forget. So they determined that him openly carrying an assault rifle at 17 was legal at the time where he was.
Okay, so two things there. Term open carry is 100% correct. It was never concealed because it was on a 3-point harness in front of him the whole time, so he could be hands-free to offer medical attention. Second part is assault rifle. I know that that term's thrown around a lot. So the definition of assault rifle most commonly is a very large caliber, which typically would be a machine gun, like a 50 cal, a Ma Deuce is what they call that in the military, I was in the Marines. Um, or something that's fully automatic, meaning that you can flip it on, hold the trigger down, and it goes pop, 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 and it just keeps firing until you let go of the trigger.
Okay.
A semi-automatic, which is what the AR-15 platform is a semi-automatic, means one pull of the trigger, one round leaves, and you have to let go and pull it again for another round to go. So that kind of function is the exact same on the 9mm Glock, on the 9mm any handgun, on really any handgun except for a revolver, or on a bolt action rifle. And bolt action rifle means there's a literal bolt sitting out on the side of the rifle that you have to turn, eject the shell, pull it back, chamber another round, and then close that, and then you can fire again. That's a bolt action. So those would be the exceptions to the rule. Almost all guns that we can buy are semi-automatic. So assault rifle specifically is a very different category than just an AR. And an AR means Armalite. I don't know if you're familiar with that. People think AR means assault rifle. It's actually Armalite, it's the company that designed the platform. But anyway, so your question was it legal for him to have it? So in the state of Wisconsin, the barrel has to have been 16 inches or longer. The total length of the weapon had, if I'm not mistaken, 28 inches or longer. And the AR platform that he was carrying that night met that criteria. And 17 or older is the age for you to be legally allowed to open carry that platform in Wisconsin. So to answer your question, yes, it was 100% legal. And that's why they actually dropped that charge before they even did the closing statements of the defense and the prosecutor. The judge said, okay, so you're telling me the rifle is this size, the law says this. Prosecution, do you have any retort of that? Prosecution was like, no. Said, okay, that case is dismissed. And so that charge was dropped altogether.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes perfect sense.
Cool.
Because so I was in a security training this week, so that's all they talked about all week. But
I hear you.
so another thing that was brought up was, I guess he had been out there all day, and they said when the guy that he shot initially assaulted him, it was earlier that day.
There was a verbal thing that there was that, because it was in somewhat daylight when that and he was saying, if I find you later alone, I'm gonna effing kill you, and he was expletive at him. You're correct on that. Yeah, that one, and that was the first guy, Rosenbaum. That was the first person that was shot. And that was when he went after him and chased him, and then he turned around and he was right on top of him, and then he fired. Yeah.
Okay, so does that not the fact that it was technically two separate incidents, did that not, or did nobody bring that up, or was it not a factor?
They did. Oh, they certainly did. The defense especially brought that up because it was showing a pattern of violence and a pattern of intent to harm from Rosenbaum, the other guy. And Rittenhouse walked away from both of those situations. The first initial one he walked away from. The guy didn't chase him the first time, and because it was in broad daylight and they were surrounded by people. The second time around, he made a different decision. Rittenhouse was running away, but he gave chase and grabbed at his weapon, and at that point, he had to make the decision to fire to stop the threat. So they definitely did take that into account for sure. That was discussed thoroughly by the prosecution and the defense.
Okay. And then also, which I'm kind of in and out of the comments or whatever, but
yeah, we can ignore that.
Like I said, I guess it's more of like, I've learned, stay out of the comments. I guess I think the issue was I had to like kind of, I guess, check myself as well, because it's like most people are looking at it from more of like a moral, emotional standpoint.
Sure.
Because like I said, when you look at the laws, and there's so many gray areas for that particular reason, because every scenario is different. When we were talking about it, it was just like, okay, well, based on how the laws are written, yeah, he was justified. I mean, like I said, I guess more of it is, like I said, most of it is just like personal feelings, which
You're saying there's a lot of emotional arguments being raised rather than
yeah,
logical arguments. Is that what you're getting at?
yeah, basically,
I agree
yeah.
with you. I totally agree with you. Yeah.
Because I
And
think
see,
at first, like,
go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was just saying, like, at first they weren't really like, at least I didn't hear that the guy, I guess it was 2 guys or 3 guys, and then he was basically cornered, so he fired. And I was like, okay, well, that's cut and dry self defense. That's kind of how it works. And then
Sure.
especially being in Florida, we got a very thorough understanding of how self defense works.
Oh, I'm from Florida too, man. Yeah, originally.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, their gun laws there to get my conceal permit from Florida. Whew, that was a lot of work.
And I'm actually, because now that I'm doing the security thing, it was like, well, you might as well just go ahead and get your thing.
Oh yeah,
get all 3 of them at one time. So I'm like, but that's so much red tape. And just like, it's kind of like, like with all of this, it's just like, is it worth it? And that's why initially, it's like so detailed, but at the same time, it's a lot of gray. So it's like, if they want to, screw you, they can screw you. So it's like,
and that attempt was made, in my opinion. I mean, how the media wove this narrative before the trial, everybody and their brother who watched the news had this idea in his head. Is like, oh, this is what this guy did. They even gave him a serial killer name. Yeah.
wow.
So I mean, they didn't ever call it on a lot of the news channels the Kyle Rittenhouse trial or any of that. They called it the Kenosha shooter trial. And that's a very loaded way to say it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It biases toward one way instead of giving people the mental freedom to decide for themselves, and I think that's improper. But something you bring up about self-defense. So now, granted, this is kind of a side topic because it's not really what happened, but the moral question that could be asked is, even if it was illegal for him to have had that particular rifle, the moral question still remains is, does a 17-year-old, if attacked by anyone, have the right to defend themselves?
I mean, if that's simply the question with no other context, I would say yes.
Right. And so that's getting down to the crux of a lot of the stuff, because some of the laws out there, and I always bring this up too, and it's an obvious answer, but let's say that it was a woman and this guy was verbally yelling at this woman, and the woman was like, I'm out of here. And she starts to run away, and that guy gives chase, and he grabs at her, and she has a pistol in her purse and pulls it out. And let's say she's 15 and it's illegal and she's actually doesn't have a license to conceal. Does she have the right to defend herself?
I mean, and that's kind of how I was going with this trial. Like, yeah, she would. I mean, I feel like she would still she would get the self-defense, but I feel like she would get hit with the not supposed to have the weapon.
I 100% agree, because she still would have broken the law having a weapon that she was not permitted to have, but she still is in her right to defend herself because of the Second Amendment and because it's morally objectively right. I mean, how much more base of a human right do we have by God than to be able to defend ourselves and our family and our rights? I see there is no more core than that.
And then one other thing,
even if it's a gun or a sword, whatever the heck it is.
Yeah. Another thing is like how people. I mean, like I said, we can't control the media, even if it is like simple people in the comments. But like,
we don't want to control them either, because that's also dangerous. That's how you get in the 40s. And that's just as dangerous, if not more so, than
But like because now people like, oh, like even the instructor that I had, he was like, oh well, I don't want to say it like that, but he kind of did us a favor. But I'm like, but you can't determine if somebody deserves to live or die after they're killed. Secondly, it's not your decision to make. And that's the only thing I don't like about it, because when stuff like that happens, then people are like, well, he was a dirtbag anyway, or, oh, and I'm like, but
not a great statement. I agree, because if he was committing a crime, he deserved due process.
Right.
I agree with you there. The thing is that the premise of the question is did Kyle make a ruling on whether this person should die? And when he gave his testimony, and I'm sure that he was prepped by his defense attorney. I'm not gonna front and act like it's, oh no, it was just off the cuff. He was just speaking truth. No, we know that he was prepped, and that's fine.
Right.
He was very specific in how he said, no, I didn't know whether or not he would die. I was trying to stop the threat to my life that was in front of me. And that's a correct statement. That is a correct statement.
Yeah.
Because no, I mean, if he was firing, now the last shot he fired, the one in the bicep, if he did that on purpose, that is amazing marksmanship. Because to be at that close a range with a rifle and to not hit him center mass, because I would have been aiming center mass. I mean, I was in the Marines. That's how I was trained. I would have been like chest, done. Head, done. That would have been me. But he shot me. Maybe it was luck, but we'll leave that alone. But the fact that he wasn't necessarily trying to kill. He was trying to stop the threat.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what he testified. Now, that can be, argued back and forth by people. That's fine. But that's what it really comes down to. If he's defending himself from the threat, I mean, let's say it was an animal. This is a horrible analogy, but let's say that he was being charged by a bull or something, and he put 4 rounds into the bull. He didn't know if the bull would die. He just knows that he's being charged at and his life's in danger, and he needs to stop it. It's the same idea, really. It's just in this case, it was sadly a human being, another image bearer of God, that his life ended that night. And I would hope that people don't celebrate the deaths. I hope that they wouldn't. People do. Oh, I'm not denying that they do. I wouldn't have wanted any of them to die in that regard, but the way that they died still was, in my opinion, proper and founded, because they were going after another person's life. When they could have just stopped. They could have been like, okay, this kid's running toward the police. All right. And they could have just stepped back. One guy did. One guy was coming at him, and he actually goes, you know what? I'm good. I'm going to back up. And he backed up, and he didn't come back at him. They all should have been that guy.
And you said one of the guys reached for the gun. Was it Kyle's gun or his personal gun?
So Rosenbaum reached for the gun.
For his gun?
No, he did not have a gun on him. He was going after Rittenhouse's gun. That was proved by medical evidence of having the gunpowder. So it was clear it was a very close range. One of them was on his hand, so he definitely grabbed the barrel at one point. But yes, was it the third guy, the skateboard guy? Yeah, the skateboard guy was the one that also grabbed at the weapon as well, which is what prompted him to be fired at. And the last guy, who had a pistol on him, pointed it down at Rittenhouse by his own testimony, and Rittenhouse fired one into his bicep, and then he backed off. But Rittenhouse didn't finish him off. He could have kept firing at that point too, because he still had 12 rounds in his magazine. He could have kept going, but he actually restrained himself. And that's what I keep bringing up too, is he actually showed a lot of restraint in a lot of this too. Because, man, I'm telling you, the way they treat you in the Marine Corps, it's until they're on the ground and not moving, you keep firing. And that's a hard thing to say, but that's how you're trained for war. Now, that's war. I know that's a different thing.
That's probably overseas, yeah.
But as far as stopping a threat, it's center mass, which is this area here. What you're seeing on your screen right now is what you're supposed to want to hit. But he actually restrained himself, because I think that speaks by itself an unspoken testimony that he did not want people to die that night. He didn't want to kill. He just wanted to stop the threat and get away.
Right. Like I said, that's totally understandable. Like I said, I can't argue that, because I mean, that's, if anybody was in that situation, I would hope they would do the same thing.
So. Oh, did he have a 30-round magazine, Hannah? You might be right. I thought he had a 20. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I thought he had a 20 mag. He might have had a
22 left.
Yeah, if it was a 30-round mag, he would have had 22 left. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I might be wrong on that one. my AR-10, I have 20s. I don't have 30 round mags. So, okay, that's fair. So he had 22 left. So, I mean, that actually it reinforces my point then. That means
Yeah.
he still had 22 more rounds he could have kept going. So, yeah. Well, cool, man. Well, you got any other questions for me with that?
I don't think so. I mean, like I said, for the most part, as far as the legal part of it, it's pretty cut and dry.
I agree with you. I do.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
thanks for having me on, man. It's
Yeah,
nice
it's
talking.
great talking to you. I appreciate you coming on and being civil and all that. That's all the conversations I've had on here tonight so far have been really good. So I appreciate you. Nice meeting you, man.
All right. You too. Bye.
All right, take care. Cool. I dig that.
Well, I've been on here a little while. I'm a little bit mentally drained, I'm not going to lie. So I am probably going to hop off of here. But thank you all for hopping on and you know, those of you involved in the chat back and forth. I always like to end my lives in some kind of positive way. I mean, this by no means was really a positive day. Yes, I believe that justice was served and that someone who was innocent didn't go to prison or was sentenced to something that they didn't deserve. But sadly, people lost their lives, and that's not something to be celebrated. It's very sad that that happened. But as rough as it is to say, violence sometimes is the answer. Sometimes it has to be the answer. For us to deny that and to shrink back from righteously delivering justice when it's needed is cowardice. So for those of you who think that violence is never the answer or should never be that, I disagree with you. We don't want to just be violent people, but at the same time, you can't let these injustices stand. You can't take away the right for someone to defend themselves or their family. You can't take away the right to defend others. And I said it earlier in the live, if I'm walking down the street and I'm concealed carrying and I look down an alley and I see a woman being raped, that guy's on the ground. And if I don't do that, I'm not being loving. I'm not being righteous. I'm the one in the wrong. If I look down and I let that injustice stand, I'm just as sinful as the person doing that act. It's wrong. It's wrong. And why is that wrong? Why is it wrong to let injustice stand? Why is it wrong to not stand for truth and to speak truth in love? Because there's objective morality. There is right and wrong, and everyone knows it. Everyone in their deep down knows it, even if they're spouting these things that disagree with what is clear truth. That killing another human being unfoundedly is wrong. I mean, I could go into 100 examples, but we need to understand something very important. And here's what it is. And for those of you who disagree, fair enough. We have a creator that has imbued in us his law, his righteous law, and we know inside what's right and wrong, but we choose not to do it. And why do we choose not to do it? Because we are all innately sinful. We have all chosen to rebel against the law of God and of God and believe in believing he exists at all. And the issue with that is that it makes us unable It makes us unable to reconcile ourselves by ourselves to that God who demands of us righteousness. But there's good news in this. The good news is that God himself, who exists as one essence or being in three persons, which is the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, he sent his Son, which is Jesus Christ, to this earth to willingly die on the cross in place of the sins that we deserve, making us able to be reconciled to God. And it's by nothing that we can possibly do. It's by his grace alone that we can be saved. So I would urge you, if you don't know about Jesus, if you don't know about God and you want to know, feel free to DM me. I'm happy to talk to you about it. I have countless videos on my page about it. The one that's pinned at the very beginning gives you a more complete view of what I'm talking about here. But I would urge each of you to really look inside yourself and say, am I really the best that I can be? Am I really who I should be? And if the answer is no, look deeper. There is an answer, and it's Jesus Christ. So thank you all for coming to my TED Talk. But it was nice of you all to join, and I really appreciate you listening to me rattle on and say way too many times. But God bless you all, and I hope you have a great night. Take care.